I know no one's on quite yet, so I'm gonna go ahead and just start talking as if it's off. But we used to do like a 5-minute music thing, just to get people online, and then, so they could hear from the very beginning. And I think it'd probably be nice if we did some sort of a intro like that, in the future again too. So, well, welcome. Thanks for coming in today, and anybody there online or watching later, thank you so much. This is the Unity adult class, the New Thought World's Religions class. It's July 24th. I'm Paul Day, and this is Unity of Springfield in Springfield, Missouri. Today we're going to be talking on a book called Homo Himsa, and I'm going to hold that up. This is a book by Judy McCoy Carmen. I was thinking of another friend of mine that has written a lot of books too. Her name was in my head, so I had to look. But Judy, I met in, it was October of last year, and I didn't even know she had written a book. It was kind of neat. I had gone to a vegan conference in Unity Village, and it was the first one. I had been talking with the person who really started that conference, and we had been talking for actually years. Her name is Carol Saunders. Good morning. And so I knew that was going to be happening. But anyway, Judy showed up. She's not someone who's formally part of Unity, although she's done a lot of things at Unity Village. But she lives in the Kansas City area, and she's been a vegan for a long time. There were a number of people that came to this conference, and I know we're having that same conference coming up in late October of this year again too. And Christy, I know you're vegan, so that may be something you might be interested in going to, or driving up for a day or something even. But do you have one of these things? Oh, and by the way, this is your new cup. So and it has your name on it too. So that is from. Hey, good morning. That is from Elena. So.
Charles Stone.
Okay. Morning, G.
Good morning, Paul.
So let's go ahead and center ourselves today so we can get started for this phenomenally wonderful class that we put on here. If you all just kind of relax your bodies and let your whole being just kind of sink into the chair. Take that big, deep breath of this wonderful Unity of Springfield fresh air. And know that you are in the right place at the right time. And that all is well.
You knew what I needed.
Big deep breath in. Let it out. Feel that divine energy flowing through you, every part of your body. Starting from the top of the head on down, that energy is just flowing into you. Through your head, through your neck, through your shoulders, and as it does, just feel those shoulders just melting. So relaxed. And the energy flows through your arms and into your torso. Relaxing your lungs, and your stomach muscles. And on down into your legs, your thighs, down through your calves and your feet. And then that energy just going right down into the ground, grounding you to Mother Earth. You are connected with that wonderful, wonderful source of life, that Mother Earth. And all we have is to be thankful for the life that we have here right now. Knowing that this is infinity, this is now, this is everything. And God is good, and all is well. And with that, my namaste to all of you. D. So, as I said a little bit earlier, doing a talk on Homo Himsa, and it's by a book named by an author named Judy McCoy-Carman, and this is it right here. And I met Judy at the vegan conference in October of last year. So, Homo Himsa, it's a play on the term Homo sapien. So what does Homo sapien mean? Anybody? Brenda?
A human being.
A human being, good deal. Okay, it was termed in 1758 by a guy named Carl Linnaeus, and he introduced that as a name for a human species, meaning wise man or human. Homo Himsa, in the same sense, then, would mean non-violent, loving human. So in the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jainist tradition, that would be respect for all living things and avoidance of violence toward other beings and things. So the title of the book, the title of the book, we just did that, and I just told you we met at Unity Village. How many know the original statement of faith for unity? Sue, I've been thinking you. Okay, if you open your little booklet that I gave you on page 1 there, in the dark print, it says, "We believe that all life is sacred and that man should not kill or be a party to the killing of animals for food. Also that cruelty, war, and wanton destruction of human life will continue so long as men destroy animals." Now, I'm just going to say for myself, this is the why behind how I found Unity. And this was the reason I started coming to Unity, is because I was vegetarian at the time, and doing a little bit of research, looked it up and found out that, wow, there was this origin of non-killing of animals with Unity. And so I started coming to Unity, and I was like, boy, I don't see any connection here with what I heard or what I read and what's going on now. But I still felt connected. I still felt like there is a connection here. And very soon after that, there was a guy named Will Tuttle that came and talked at Unity, and probably some of you have seen him. He was at the vegan conference this last October also. But then I really quickly did realize, because he is a part of Unity, and I think he is a Unity minister as far as that goes too, but he, maybe not, maybe I'm incorrect, okay, I thought he was, okay. But he does travel around to a lot of Unity churches around the country and gives talks on vegetarianism and veganism. During our People's Unity Conference in June, another person I met there was a guy named Sailesh Rao, and he wrote 2 books, one called Carbon Dharma, and the other one is called Karma Yoga. And he gave a talk for the whole conference one day, and it was a 3-hour presentation to the entire group, and it's a consideration of many in the Unity worldwide ministries that possibly we want to adopt some sort of a platform for nonviolence towards all and helping to restore the health on this planet. And we're talking about climate change here and about how we as a group can facilitate that. and be leaders in that too. I think it's something that it's all on our mind right now. Climate change, obviously, you can walk outside and it hits you in the face right now. It will knock you down, okay? So right now, according to, you take any scientific study that you choose, and you're gonna find out that they all can tie in animal agriculture being responsible from anywhere from 25% to 85% of the debilitating effects of the climate change on the planet. And you think, okay, even if that's the lower end, even if it's only a quarter of what's going on helping to heat this planet, isn't that something that we might want to think about? But I've heard, again, I've heard as much as 85%. So I know, LB, you had talked about before about how Greg Braden had made a comment on what he believed the causation of climate change.
Part of it. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask anybody else, what are your thoughts on that? Is this something that we need to take seriously? Is it something that is just a passing thing? Is it a natural thing? Is it human caused? What are your thoughts?
Combination.
Okay.
Let's get.
Oh, yeah, let's get the microphone.
Greg said. No.
There you go.
You have to be smarter than the mic.
Okay, so Greg Braden says that it's a secular thing due to the fact that we are, I think, the closest to the center of the galaxy that we've been in a long time. And when you look back at the history of the planet, it was pretty hot when the dinosaurs were hanging out.
Planet Earth.
And then, it's gone too cold when the mastodons froze in the ice. But I don't think we're helping it. I know when I lived in San Diego, they said the temperature had raised 10 degrees because of all the highways that were holding the heat.
Okay.
So there's a whole lot of factors, but we definitely are accelerating it.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Larry.
We are not, I got this on, we are not facing climate change, we're facing climate crisis. And it may be too late, but we need to start doing something. But we've got a Congress that's unwilling to do anything, especially Republicans. They're committed to doing nothing. And I'm not a Democrat or Republican, I'm an independent, but I just hate to see what's going on now continue, because our world's going to be in a terrible place in 30 or 40 years.
Okay. Everybody else, what are your thoughts? Go ahead, Sue. Thanks, James. I appreciate that.
So a big part of our conference, our Unity conference this year, a whole day was dedicated to Earth Care. And I did the online portion, and Silas Rao was the one who spoke for the entire day. And it was fascinating to listen to him and to listen to the science behind what he was saying about, of course, mass agriculture with all of the animals and the green gases and things like that. It just made sense as I was listening to it. So I really encourage you, if you haven't checked out Silas Rao on YouTube, to do that. And it gives you, it really gave me pause for thought. It really made me stop and look and go, wow.
Yeah.
It didn't make me a vegetarian, but I'm not saying I'll never be, but not today.
Yeah.
How do you spell his name?
SAILESH, and then Rao is his last name, RAO. And he does have YouTube videos out there. Phenomenal guy. This guy is a brilliant scientist. He is actually a physicist. He worked, he's actually retired now to dedicate and he's a young guy. He's dedicating his life to go around talking about climate change and how the massive animal agriculture that we have now is contributing tremendously to the heating of the earth, and how we need to change, and we need to do it immediately. And and I did give a talk on him a few weeks ago, and this book, Carbon Dharma, and sometime I'll give a talk on Carbon Yoga. I've read them both. They're phenomenal books. He's a phenomenal person. His energy is so incredible. So I do encourage you to check him out. James.
So my perspective on the climate is kind of two parts. First of all, it originates in consciousness. And I believe that things like fear and worry, resentment, blame, guilt, criticism, judgment, desire for vengeance, jealousy, contributes to the patterns of behavior that are causing climate change. So trying to fight against it, I personally don't believe that's the right response.
Right.
But first start with expanding your capacity to experience love and joy and peace in life, and then take action from those vantage points. I believe that's the solution, and that it exists in consciousness first.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, James. I really do like that perspective. And I think that's what Silas Rao really concentrates on too. He takes a very positive look at it. And he is just very loving in the way he does it. And I'm trying to really do that for myself too, to be honest. But sometimes, sometimes you can just walk outside, get hit with that heat, and start using some 4-letter words.
Really?
Yeah, you haven't heard that, have you, Elliot?
Paul Brandon has something to say.
One of the things that is contributing to it is a few years ago they come out with all 18-wheelers had to run low sulfur fuel, and then EPA come out and then they have to run their exhaust fluid through it,
Yeah.
and they make the exhaust comes out of the truck is about 500 degrees hotter than it would be if it didn't have any of that computerized stuff on it.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the things that
Yeah.
catalytic converters on vehicles,
Yeah.
they cause the vehicles to run to put out more hotter exhaust. So
Yeah.
all that is a contributing factor to the
Yeah. And sometimes when you get progress in one way, it might hurt it in another, and that's a good example of that, Brenda.
so it's hard to it's causing it to heat the planet up,
Yeah.
but on the other hand it's helped clean the air, so
Yeah.
you have to balance which is the right way
Yeah.
to go about
Right. Thanks, Brenda.
handling things.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, how many of you would intentionally harm or bring pain to an animal?
Could you say that a little bit louder?
How many of you would intentionally harm or bring pain to an animal?
Depends on the animal.
A
Okay.
mouse, a
There are
rat.
certain animals I would bring harm and pain to.
I mean, we do that with mice and rats, but I hear what you're saying, you're talking about.
Yeah. Would you go out there and kick the dog across the street? Of course not. And the thing is, really, we're born into this world without the thought of wanting to do harm, let alone kill another animal. And to be honest, even a mouse, I think as we come into the world, we're curious about this other creature or whatever. My contention is that really we don't want to harm. We don't want to kill other animals.
Just one sentence. Off the top of my head, you sound like a humanist. That's what I am. You sound just like one.
Okay. That means really in our foundational being, we're really all vegans. Now I'm going to talk about what a vegan is here in just a little bit. We come into the world as being vegan, and we are then we come in with compassion towards all life. We want to be treated with compassion. We want to be treated with love. And what is the golden rule? Remember, okay, we want to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And that's what really, in essence, that's what vegan really is about. Okay, it's about treating others as we want to be treated also. So we want to have compassion towards all life, especially our animal brothers and sisters. So I have two friends whose daughters, when they first discovered what meat was, and I'm talking about when they were like 3 years old, they found out this is an animal, and immediately refused to take another bite of meat ever again, and they never did. And I personally know those two people. One today is a medical doctor, and the other is a chemical science with a PhD, and they're still vegetarians. When I was a teenager, I did choose to be a vegetarian, and it was for many different reasons. But needless to say, I raised my kids on a vegetarian diet. Obviously, I'm a vegetarian, I cook, and so they grew up being vegetarians. Now, today, only one of them is really vegetarian, and because I stress that I want them to be independent thinkers. I want them to, really just to think for themselves what it is that they're, want to put in their body. But I remember when one of my girls was young, and someone came up to her and said, "Oh, what is your favorite food?" And she goes, "Broccoli." And and they thought, "Oh, ha 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 ha, you're just joking," of course, And she wasn't. That was, she was only used to eating pretty healthy foods, and broccoli to her was a good food. And it's hard to find kids that actually think that way. So today, as I said, only one of them is vegetarian, but it didn't dim their desire, I think, to really kind of change their diet as they did grow up, and most of them do eat, I would say, less meat, but they still, partake anyway. Since we all came into the world with a compassionate heart with love towards all, something had to have happened to change the way that we did become and eat the diet that we do eat. What are some of the things that you might think of that has influenced us foundationally between when you were young and now? Can you think of anything that might have brought you to change the way you thought about animals?
Well, I think that most people just look at the regular animals that we eat as food supply.
Yeah.
I was raised on a small farm, and then my grandparents had a larger farm up the road, and even as a child, I was looking at chickens and eggs and cows and pigs, and I was thinking, we're eating this? But I was taught that was just the norm, That's what they are for, There'd be an overpopulation if we didn't eat them and destroy them, so.
Well, thanks, Chrissy, and I think that's what I wanted to really get at. We kind of take a look at this hamburger, and it's just something that we eat. It's something that we've always eaten. It's just food. It tastes good. It's what we think of as being part of what we need to eat, what we should eat. So what I'm trying to get at is, I think, when we're young, we're influenced by family. We're influenced by habits, conditions, friends, and later on, we're influenced by many things like addictions too, because eating can become an addiction, So anyway, I know for my diet history, I remember my dad trying to get me to eat meat, and I can't do it, and now I did eat some forms of meat, but there were some that I just couldn't, and he forced me to the point where I threw up, and so it is part of our culture, and it's so ingrained in us, and it is so normal to think that this is something that we have to do, and we don't have a choice.
I think we're kind of taught to disassociate too, because when you're a child, you just pick up those meats in the grocery store and you don't really
Exactly.
think about,
They're
you
a
don't,
thing, aren't they?
they're just a
Yeah.
thing that you
Yeah.
do and buy
Yeah.
to eat. You don't
Yeah.
associate them with the animal and the death of the animal
Yeah.
and that it bleeds and that,
Yeah.
all associated with that.
Yeah,
So-
well, that's another good point. I was reading an article just a couple days ago, and it was an article on insects actually, and how science is now determining that they have a nervous system. They actually have pain, experience pain. They actually experience emotions, and that's just an insect. What do animals feel? I mean, do animals feel the same things that we feel? Do they not feel the same things that we feel? From all indications that I can see, if I took my dog and wanted to do anything towards, harming that dog would flinch. It would whimper. It would show such an emotion that could bring me to tears. That's the condition that we need to look at for all animals, I think. As Charles Fillmore said, all life is sacred. And we need to start looking at these animals as being something other than just our food supply. So when I was very young, I grew up in a town of about 15,000 people. There were 5 black families in town. And I remember walking down the street near my grandmother's house, and there was a young black boy about my age walking the other direction, and I started laughing at him and started calling him racial slurs. Now I shudder about the fact that I did that now. And I can't imagine how hurtful and how painful that must have been for this young boy. And yet, I didn't know any better, okay? I think about other members of my extended family, mostly uncles, maybe some cousins, that used those racial slurs and talked about black people in a way that we would never think about now. But I was influenced. I was influenced strongly by friends and by these relatives that I just, and I was very young, but I could never, ever condone that with any of my own kids now. And I know my immediate family wouldn't have condoned it either. They were absolutely above that. But what I'm trying to say here is that we are influenced so strongly, and especially our eating habits, by conditions such as family. We can and do harm unconsciously through familial patterns that we have not fully brought up into that enlightened consciousness that we're trying to do here at Unity, right? We're trying to elevate ourselves in thinking and in our actions and our words and our thoughts. And I think that's what Charles was trying to do too with when him and Myrtle, both of them were very staunch vegetarians, what they were trying to do. And I really always have thought, because Charles and Myrtle were staunch vegetarians early on, I'm talking about going back to the very beginning of the 20th century, their teachings on vegetarianism are, in my opinion, what separated Unity from other New Thought movements. So, does anybody have any thoughts about that? Or is that just my thought? It's not something that really, because if you look back, we dropped this statement of faith back in 1939. Why did they drop it in 1939, do you think? Myrtle had just passed away, okay? Charles was not far from dying either. He was maybe, I think he died in 42, is that right? Was it, I can't remember what it was, but he kind of let others really build up into the higher functioning of the movement, I guess. And so they kind of dropped that part, they dropped the ball on vegetarianism then. And so they dropped that statement of faith. But I always thought that that was kind of something that separated Unity from the rest of the New Thought movement anyway. So what is vegan? I'm going to read you something that came out of Time magazine. November 1 is World Vegan Day, a celebration of people who don't eat meat or eggs or cheese or mayonnaise or honey or whey or gelatin or anything that comes from or includes an animal. Nor do they use any clothing, accessory, or object made from an animal. No leather, no wool, no pearls, no ivory keyed pianos. The animal-free holiday began in 1994 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of vegan society. The word vegan didn't even come about until 1944. So that doesn't mean that people weren't vegans, but there was no term called vegan. It's an extreme form of vegetarianism, according to the article, and though the term was coined in 44, the concept of eating flesh avoidance can be traced back to ancient Indian and Eastern Mediterranean societies. Vegetarianism is first mentioned by the Greek philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras of Samos around 500 BCE. In addition to his theorem about right triangles, Pythagoras promoted benevolence among all species, including humans. Followers of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism also advocated vegetarianism, believing that humans should not inflict pain on other animals. The meatless lifestyle never really caught on in the West. What a surprise. Although it would sometimes pop up during health crazes and religious revivals. The Ephrata cloister, a strict religious sect founded in 1732 in Pennsylvania, advocated vegetarianism. The 18th century utilitarian philosopher Jeremiah Bentham believed that animal suffering was just as serious as human suffering and likened the idea of human superiority to racism. The first vegetarian society was formed in 1847 in England. 3 years later, Reverend Sylvester Graham, the inventor of graham crackers, co-founded the American Vegetarian Society. Graham was a Presbyterian minister, and his followers, called Grahamites, obeyed his instructions for a virtuous life. So if you've ever had a graham cracker, you are a Grahamite. In 1944, a British woodworker named Donald Watson announced that because vegetarians ate dairy and eggs, he was not going to create a new term called, he was now going to create a new term called vegan to describe people who did not. Tuberculosis had been found in 40% of the Britain's dairy cows the year before, and Watson used this to his advantage, claiming that it proved that the vegan lifestyle protected people from tainted food. Okay, so by the time Watson died at age 95 in 2005, there were 250,000 self-identifying vegans in Britain and 2 million in the US. Moby, Woody Harrelson, Fiona Apple are vegans, so is Dennis Kucinich. This article was written about 10 years ago. There's a lot more people now. If you get on to see who's a vegan, it's like, wow, it's like a list of who's who. Strict veganism prohibits the use of animal product, even if it isn't food, but like any lifestyle choice that ends in an ism, there are plenty of people who cheat. The vitamin B12 is found almost entirely in animal products, so many vegans eat fortified food or take a vitamin to get the right amount. And while American vegetarianism has broken free of its philosophical and religious roots, becoming an accepted health choice, many restaurants offer vegetarian options, and most dinner party planners now ask, is anyone vegetarian, before planning the menu. Veganism is still tied to the animal rights movement and is out there on the fringe. And of course, that was written about 10 years ago. So I know Sue and I just went out a couple days ago to celebrate my sister's 50th wedding anniversary down in Branson, and there wasn't one vegetarian thing on the menu. So it's not always the case that there is something for vegetarians, but
It was a
more
very
so.
conservative restaurant.
It was a very conservative restaurant, yes it was. Okay. So I'm going to come clean with my own admission. I do call myself a vegan at times. I kind of go in waves where sometimes I'm very strict, and then sometimes I waver from that. But I've always, and again, I've been a vegetarian since I was a teenager. But I've always ate honey. I've always wore leather. I've always taken foods which had dairy or eggs in them, when someone else is cooking them and offering them to me. So even in times when I tried my hardest, I wasn't really technically what you would call vegan. I don't really like labels, but I do like the term vegetarian, but I feel like I'm a little bit stronger than that, and yet so I kind of like the idea that I call myself, plant-based. Christy, how do you respond to that? Do you wear leather? Do you ever take honey, being a vegan?
I've gotten away from honey. I don't.
Okay.
There's always agave nectar and
Yeah.
alternatives.
You can easily
Yeah.
transition to other
But you do, basically, you can't have the norm food-wise. You're going to always have to assume at least has egg or milk in it, probably.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is different.
And they're in so many things. It really is so
yes.
true. And it takes a very concerted effort.
It is not a vegan society that we live in.
No.
But at home, it's simple because
Yeah, you
I've
have
gotten away
control
with it.
over everything. Yeah, absolutely. Personally,
Stupid, I don't have my hearing aid in.
oh, I didn't know you did this.
Personally, I encourage people not necessarily even to be vegan or vegetarian, but I really, if I'm talking to anyone, trying to encourage, and what I'm trying to do here is trying to encourage people to be what is called flexitarian. Okay, so, and that's to be open-minded about educating yourself to conscious and ethical eating. Know what it is you're actually putting in your body, what actually effects that are taking place because of the actions that we do have. Okay, to consciously eat less animal protein, and that's because of the studies that I've done for myself. I know health-wise it's better, for the planet it's better. To eat organically, even if you do eat meat, to buy from small farmers, that has a less impact on the earth than it does, if this commodity-driven, mass-produced, agricultural society that we live in is contributing so much to the destruction of the planet, and to be conscious of that anyway.
So would a true vegan use a horse, ride a horse, and use a horse in their farming operations? Would a vegan use horses in their farming operations and stuff like that?
I don't know why not, but then again, I don't know.
You're not hurting the horse.
I feel like using animals in a productive and loving way, as long as we're not abusing the animal. I don't know, but that's my thought on it anyway. Yeah. So. It's interesting right now. I'm reading the journals of Lewis and Clark. She knows that. She's seen me picking up the book and laying down on the couch and reading it. But so Lewis and Clark were the first ones to really they weren't the first, but they were the first that we really look at as being the ones to really discover the western part of the United States, right? They left from St. Louis, they took off, and I think in 2 to 3 years' time, they went all the way to the Pacific Ocean, came back, and they met with a number of other Indian tribes. And as I'm reading the book, and it's a journal, so it's on a day-by-day journal of what they went through. And every day they're killing. Well, we killed 3 antelopes and 4 deer, and and it's like, oh wow, and I'm thinking, what other option did they have? They had to kill. And we think about traditional societies, maybe Inuit or Eskimo tribes, and Alaska, they don't have any way to grow food, right? So the only option to survive in that kind of a climate is to actually eat fish, eat animals, and to get along. And so it made me think about, how some of the traditional societies dealt with the whole thing with killing and eating animals. So I found an article online about how Cherokees treated animals. In the Cherokee matriarchal nation, men hunted and women worked the fields. Men prepared for hunting by purifying themselves in a sacred ritual before the hunt. Cherokees traditionally hunted in Tennessee, Georgia, and Carolinas. That's where they came from. As a resourceful people, Cherokees, like the majority of Native American tribes, respected nature and used every part of the animal after a hunt. Ancient techniques combined with folklore and polytheistic religion led to a highly distinct set of hunting traditions among the Cherokees. The Cherokee incorporated religious rituals into their hunting traditions. Hunters would abstain from sexual intercourse 4 days prior to and 4 days after a hunt in a form of purification to please the spirits. The two great gods of hunting were Nutah, god of fire or the sun, and the long person, the name for the river or water god. Before a hunting expedition, a hunter would dip in a pool of water at sundown while singing an ancient chant. He would fast the next day and again at sundown, dip in water while chanting. On the second night, he would cook a meal, eat, and then spread the ashes from the fire across his chest. On the third morning, after pleasing the fire and water gods, the hunters would begin the hunt. While hunting, Cherokee hunters would pray to the wind, rivers, and mountains for success. After killing an animal, Cherokee hunters would ask the gods forgiveness for taking the animal's life. After killing a deer, the hunters would throw the tongue and some of its meat into the fire as a sacrifice. Hunting in groups, a band of Cherokee hunters started in the morning to look for game. A hunting expedition often lasted several days, but rarely longer than a week. Unlike the Plains Indians, the Cherokee lived in woodlands where animals were bountiful. They hunted a variety of animals, including deer, turkey, fox, rabbit, elk, and bear. Deer were especially important for the Cherokee lifestyle as they used every part, including the hides, for clothing and tent making. Cherokees were skilled craftsmen and used a variety of weapons for hunting and warfare. The Cherokees used the familiar bow and arrow as a long-range weapon to take down big game such as deer. Cherokees made bows and arrows using flint feathers, cane shaft, sycamore, hickory, and bear oil. Small game such as bird and rabbit was often taken down with blow darts made of locust and thistle. And then it just goes on to talk about other means that they were able to take down. But what I wanted to point out was they did really consciously think about taking an animal's life. It wasn't today where you walk into, a fast food restaurant and you purchase something. You don't have to kill that animal. You don't have to think about that animal. It's just something automatically that we do. But in traditional societies, it was something that they thought about. And even though I think they felt like it was something important to their livelihood, it was something that they recognized that these animals actually were spirit beings also. From history and geographically speaking, it may have seemed deemed necessary to kill animals to eat. In some parts of the world where it is brutally cold, which we talked about, like in Alaska, lacking fertile soil and remote, still might be necessary to kill animals to eat. But in most parts of the world now, in modern society, it's not really necessary. Our time has come. Killing animals isn't a necessity, it's a choice. So I wanted to look at just a very few varying cultures and practices. Has anybody ever heard of Jainism before? It's another religion called Jainism. Jain, Jains. Yeah. Okay. They come from Mideast, mostly from India. They've been around since 3000 BCE, so we're talking, they've been around for 5,000 years. The whole religion is based on non-violence. It's based on not killing other animals. But they stretch it even further. They don't even kill an insect, or at least the ones on the far fringes don't anyway. A lot of them will wear masks. Not because of COVID, but they've been doing that for generations because they don't want to kill microorganisms even. So it's on a far stretch there, but it's all about nonviolence, okay? Hindus and yoga practitioners, we're talking about, we go back tens of thousands of years in the yoga tradition. And, if you came to classes that I taught on yoga and Hindus, they don't know how far back, but it was in the very earliest human societies that Hindu and yoga practitioners began in the Indus Valley. Their whole tradition was about vegetarianism. They did not eat meat. So this is nothing new, folks. This is something that goes back to many of the early parts of human society. Food was seen how it affected both the mind and the body. And if you go to India, even today, you can go to Calcutta or, Delhi, New Delhi, and you'll see cows walking around the streets. They look at cows as being sacred. And so, there's a very big problem, because of that even. So in my yoga practices, we're taught to be vegetarian. And, but if you're gonna eat meat, to eat the lower forms of life. So what might this look like to you? What are the lower forms of life? What does that mean, actually? Do we look at it as a mastodon as being the lower form of life? Or do we look at, a mouse being the lower form of life? What is it that consciously we think of as being a lower form of life? Anybody have any thoughts on that? A lot of people will think of the lower forms of life as being something like fish. Something that fish were actually the very first animals that on Earth. Okay, we supposedly all evolved from water. Okay, so they might so some cultures, in fact, Jesus was claimed to be by some to be pescatarian, right? So Jesus ate fish. Possibly. Find the verse that says he ate lamb.
At the Passover dinner, that is
okay.
Part of the Passover dinner is lamb.
Okay. I'd like to see the verse that said that though, but anyway.
He ate Passover.
Okay.
And that's what's included in the Passover because they killed the Passover lamb when they were leaving Egypt, and that's where it was started. But it was, that lamb was taken into their house for a week as a pet almost, so that they would understand the severity or whatever of that sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now Passover goes back to being Jewish tradition, right? Yeah. So and again, that's a whole nother subject about Jewish tradition and eating. What does Jewish tradition do even today? To eat meat, it has to be what?
Kosher. It's killed
right.
in it. It's
Okay.
killed in a way that is
supposed to be more humane, correct?
is more humane.
Right.
Okay, it's killed in a way that is more humane.
Uh-huh.
Their necks are slit and they basically are bled.
Right.
So that you're not eating the blood,
Yeah.
which is considered sacred in Hebrew.
Right.
And it's killed in a humane way.
Right. Okay. And we think about how do we kill in a humane way? I'm sorry, I'm being facetious here, but how do we kill in a humane way? And the thing is, when we talk about Jewish and their tradition of having it to be kosher, what's the when you think about that, it's all to alleviate guilt. Okay? Guilt for killing, because even in the Ten Commandments, we're talking about Jewish tradition here. Thou shalt not kill. Does that just mean people? Because there's a lot of biblical scholars who will say that it means thou shalt not kill.
And they were a warring tribe. They killed lots of people.
And through history, haven't we all? Because we don't follow that guide, right? So the whole tradition of kosher came about because of the killing, because it came to alleviate the guilt of the killing. That's what I believe. That's what I think a lot of biblical scholars would even say too. Now there'd be a lot of people that would argue with me on that too. But, so anyway, the China study. I did a talk about the China study a few months ago. It was written by a guy named T. Colin Campbell and his son, Dr. Thomas Campbell. He was a farmer. He was a big farmer, big meat eater. And he was doing studies on trying to help out third world countries improve disease and mostly in children in third world countries. And so he started doing his research and found out something quite the opposite, and that was that animal protein, and he was studying cancer in kids. He found out that those who were eating more meat or animal protein were actually getting cancer. And he could actually take the cancer away by reducing the amount of animal protein that they consumed. And so it startled him tremendously. And so he wrote a book called The China Study, and they were doing studies in China regarding the same outcome, that the more meat consumption, the greater the greater cancer incidence. The less meat consumed, the lower the cancer. And he came up with a conclusion that anything less than, I can't remember what it was 20% of your diet, with animal protein is actually best for those in any society. Christianity, a vast number of early Christians were vegetarian. The Essenes, the Cathars, the early LDS Church, and the early Unity, Seventh-day Adventists, to name just a few, and many of the early vegetarian Christian movements were killed off by the Catholic Church. Okay, now the Catholic Church was the only church, an early part of our Christianity, right? And for whatever reason, they saw those Christian societies being a threat to their dominance. I wanted to read one thing before we kind of end here, and this is on an article by a Jewish rabbi, actually. Someone wrote to him, this is from a Jewish periodical, and someone wrote to this Rabbi Gelman and said, I have an ongoing problem because I'm living as a hypocrite. I'm an animal lover, but I eat meat. I don't eat veal or lamb because they are from young animals, but I eat meat, fish, fowl, and eggs. Is there anything in the Bible that refers to this or to Christ's personal practice? Did Jesus eat meat? I'm aware that I'm looking for absolution for eating meat, but I can't get rid of this conflict in my mind. As I say, it is hypocritical. I would never hunt or fish, but I eat what someone else kills to put meat on my table. Is killing and eating animals a sin in the eyes of God or Jesus? What would Jesus have said? P.S. I contribute to many animal groups, especially to help farm animals and to ban dog racing, etc., but it doesn't erase the guilt. And this is his answer. In Genesis 1:29, God speaks to Adam. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food. In the second chapter of Genesis, 2:16 and 17, vegetarianism is reaffirmed as the people's spiritually proper diet. However, one tree in the Garden of Eden bore forbidden fruit. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou hast eaten thereof thou shalt surely die. Nothing could be clearer. God doesn't want us to eat meat. People are made in God's image and animals are not, but this spiritual difference is not sufficiently morally significant to allow killing animals for food. Killing another person is a capital crime and a sin. Killing an animal is just a sin. The moral and spiritual ambiguity about eating meat is made more explicit in the 9th chapter of Genesis, 9 verse 3 through 6. When God tells Noah in the covenant made with him after the great flood, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast I will require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. So God has a change of heart and strikes what I consider to be a perfect spiritual balance. God is saying that being a vegetarian is clearly the higher way, but it is not the only way. Meat is not murder, but it is not the highest moral level to which we can elevate our diet. Eating meat also makes us comfortable around blood, and blood is life. Spilling the blood of animals makes us less revolted by spilling the blood of people. This nuanced position that eating meat is a concession to human carnivorous urges, but not our highest level, helps us to learn that the Bible offers us many levels of spiritual practices. We can live a life on as high a level as we want. The question of whether or not Jesus was a vegetarian is complicated. There is no direct statement on the subject by Jesus in the New Testament. The story of Jesus feeding fish to people would support the view that Jesus may have been a pescatarian. Paul seems to have been more open to meat eating, but even Paul was open to vegetarianism. And I'm not going to keep reading on that. But modern Christianity has produced the vegetarian Seventh-day Adventists who are vegetarians because of the teachings of their co-founder, Ellen G. White. So what can I say to ease your carnivorous guilt? I would suggest that you experiment with meatless Mondays and then no meat till dinner, and then maybe a period of time when you eat no meat for a period of time. Your moral intuitions are right. There is something hypocritical about the way we profess life and then eat the world to death. Remember that your journey to God has many levels, and you ought to have no shame or guilt about the stage of your journey that you have reached so far. And I think I just wanted to say, I really feel like that's more of my conclusion, that we have to choose the level of the comfort that's for us, right? And to hold in no guilt or any shame on what we do. Charles and Myrtle did teach a vegetarian diet, and yet they condemned no one for what that diet was. We see familiar beliefs, habits, patterns, but we have